by expanding our view of capitalism beyond the economic to take in these other dimensions of the crisis, we have a better chance of constructing the broad kind of alliance, the broad kind of political front that we need to do something about it.
Okay, and so if the idea is, we are by expanding our definition of capitalism and these multiple crises, that we will find more allies, essentially. What is the limiting principle? I mean, because you talk about, and should there be one as we go out and look for allies? You talk about the different types of populism, or the two types of populism, sort of the left and the right, and the left having a binary notion of what we're dealing with in terms of populism, and the right having a tripartite aversion. And then also the way that the left and the right define their enemies is different. Is that, will you walk us through those? And is that the sort of the limiting principle? Is that where we know this gives us the lines to know where we don't look for allies? Or is it that we're trying to change the way that those who look at the tripartite version of populism adopt the binary? But walk us through those and then answer. I don't mean to put that all together.
A great question. What I said before about the people losing faith in the established parties and political leaders and so on, looking for the out of the box. That's what has given us left populism versus the right populism. In the United States, we can say Sanders versus Trump if we go back to 2016, which was when this all exploded. And yes, I think that if you think about what's the difference between those two, some of their language overlapped, right? Both of them talked about a rigged system, and that was very interesting. And that word rigged is such a powerful word. It really resonated with many, many people who had been feeling for a long time that, that they were being sort of played for suckers in our whole form of life here. What's the difference, though? Basically, I think that if we talk about Trumpism, for example, right-wing populism, I think that their picture of society is that there are the good, real Americans, the virtuous people that are caught between two blood-sucking enemies, right? The wealthy bi-coastal elites at the top, and the immigrants, the Mexicans, the Blacks, the Jews, the scapegoats du jour, all of them. And those people are sucking, preying on the virtuous people caught in the middle. That's their map of what how society looks. 3 levels. I think left-wing populism is much simpler. I think it only has 2 levels. It has the elites, or the capitalist class, or whatever language you want to use, the corporate class, let's say, the
1%, the 1%, yeah.
Perfect, and then it has basically the people is understood much more broadly because many, many people are preyed upon by that 1%. It's not just those in the middle. It's not just those at the bottom. And the advantage of that is that it opens the possibility of that broader alliance of the bottom, the middle, and so on against the very top. That was the whole genius of the language of 99% versus 1%, which is sociologically imprecise, but rhetorically genius, I think. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect that you mentioned is how are the enemies conceived in each of the 2 maps, the right populist versus the left populist. And I would say that the right populist, it's very concrete. They want to characterize people in an ethnic way, in terms of color, in terms of religion, cultural concreteness. When you say that the problems are the immigrants, the Mexican rapists, the Jews who cannot replace us, et cetera, we are talking in very concrete terms. Left-wing populism is more abstract. refers to Wall Street. It refers to the 1%, as you just said. These are terms that don't say much about the specific identities or cultural profiles of the people, but they talk about the function of those people within the society. That's much better. Look, Wall Street can slide into international Jewish conspiracy. We know the history. I'm not saying that it's impervious, but still, it's a lot better to talk about Wall Street or Silicon Valley than to talk about Mexicans or Jews.
And the left can conceive of I guess someone who can betray their class because they're talking about the function. They can betray, a Wall Streeter can betray their fellow Wall Streeters because of their function, as opposed to, like, you don't hear the concept of, like, this is the one good immigrant. I mean, maybe there's some good ones in there, that type of thing. But there's no, you're an immigrant, or you're not. It is that much more concrete and of an identity rather than the function that you're serving.
Exactly. And it's much harder to separate the person from the identity than it is the person from the function. I completely agree with you. And that's why I think that even though, as I say, I don't consider left-wing populism the end-all and be-all, I hope it would serve as a transition to something like democratic socialism. But nevertheless, it's a lot. It's far superior. It's far more sociologically correct in a way. It's not Jews who are sucking the blood. It is the corporate sector and the financial sector. And these are not the same thing. So, this is a lot better. And I want to come to the second part of your question, though, because you asked, how should the left look at those people who are now attracted to right-wing populism? Should we simply write them off and exclude them? And I would say not exactly. I want to introduce a distinction. I think that that the right-wing populist movement, such as it is, includes people whom I would call principled racists, whom I want nothing to do with, and a much larger number of people I would call opportunistic racists, people who will vote for a racist who talks a good class line when there's no other alternative on the ballot who's talking a good class line. So we know, for example, that lots of people who eventually voted for Trump, especially in the upper Midwest, who had once voted for Obama, and they voted, and some of them, when he was on the ballot for Sanders in the Democratic primary. This shows me that these people are not principled racists, but opportunistic racists. And I think that the left strategy should be one of splitting. Two splits we have to make. One, we have to split the right-wing populist bloc and get rid of the principled racists on one side and the corporate elites who play a big role in manipulating that side of populism, okay? And woo, or try to win the other component of that right-wing populism. I also think we need to split the other side. And the other side I've called progressive neoliberalism. That might sound like a contradiction in terms, but I think it's a real thing. I think it's the sort of the Clinton wing, let's say, of the Democratic Party that basically incorporated a lot of sort of mainstream feminism, mainstream anti-racism, mainstream LGBTQ political forces, and hook them up with this regressive pro-Wall Street, pro-Silicon Valley, pro-Hollywood political economy. So it was an anti-working class, an unholy alliance of sort of liberal, the meritocratic liberal wings of social movements and the sort of cosmopolitan sector of the capitalist class. And I want to split them too. I want us to win the feminists, the anti-racists, the LGBTQ forces away from that unholy alliance with corporate capital. And I think that Sanders was trying to do something like this. I don't want to idealize his campaigns. They weren't perfect, but I think he had something like that double splitting strategy. We have right-wing populism. We have progressive neoliberalism. Let's try to build the third thing, call it left-wing populism or democratic socialism.